Welcome to America This Week. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
Walter, let's be unpopular today. Let's do something that...
Oh, for a change?
Yeah, for a change that people are going to hate us for, say that we're grumpy old get off our lawn types, and get into a court battle that is likely to be hugely significant to both sides, and is not just a legal story, but is a significant journalism story because it has been almost entirely misreported from the beginning. So, and we're going to tiptoe around the elephant in the room, which is election denial. Okay, and obviously that was the huge story after the vote in 2020. Donald Trump saying that he was cheated, blah, blah, blah.
A phrase I had never heard before 2020, by the way, election denial.
Right. Yes, I know.
A little like vaccine hesitancy.
Right. It was called something else before. It was called questioning the results or whatever it was.
Right. Wanting a recount. It was called lots of things.
Before 2020, and remember, this was a very unusual election season for a variety of reasons. We had COVID. We had people. A lot of people were voting from home. There were major and some significant changes to the kinds of ways people were allowed to vote. Right. We had
privately funded drop boxes from Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. Ballot harvesting, like all these things. There were, people basically didn't come to vote on election day. Right. So there were lots of things that were different about this election. And as a result, partly as a result of that, we got some unusual messages before the election. So let's look at 2020.
With the prospect of more Americans voting from home this fall, new concern that Election Day could stretch well beyond November 3rd, as the coronavirus and states scrambling to offer safe alternatives to voting at the polls. Many are now expanding absentee or mail-in voting options.
If there's a strong absentee ballot preference this time around, it may be election week.
If recent primaries are any indication, final results could be delayed. Key battleground states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which all narrowly put President Trump over the top in 2016, saw massive surges in absentee voting this past spring. For some who did go to the polls, long lines like these in Wisconsin and in Georgia that kept voters waiting hours. And this cautionary tale in New York's 12th congressional district. Absentee ballots are still being counted after last month's primary, no winner declared. As of now, 41 states will allow votes by mail in some form this November. 8 of those states will mail a ballot application in advance, while 7 will automatically send the ballot in the mailbox. Meanwhile, 9 states are still requiring an excuse beyond COVID-19 concerns to vote absentee. The changes in how we vote, a dramatic shift. Up until now, only 5 states voted primarily by mail.
So that's actually a relatively down the middle story, except that it characterized the main change as being about voting by mail. We're going to be doing more voting by mail this time around. Okay.
For safety reasons.
For safety reasons. Let's look at warning number 1.
Federal agents urge everyone to be aware of misinformation spreading online ahead of this fall's election. The FBI says cyber criminals and even foreign actors will likely put out false information in an effort to discredit election results by creating new websites, changing websites, or using social media. Agents are asking you, the voter, to do your part.
We want people to know their friends, quote unquote friends, on social media websites, and make sure that those friends, when they're sourcing information, are sourcing them from reliable media sources. We want people to use official government websites for voting information. We don't want you getting your voting information from different social messaging apps.
The FBI also issued a public service announcement telling the public to expect delays in election results this year.
Okay, so they told you to expect delays in the counting
and expect to be deceived.
expect that complaints about election results had a good chance to be misinformation behind the scenes, as we knew from the Twitter files and some other things.
And challenge your friends on where they get their information.
Right, exactly. So a lot of us were, I think, most Americans, most of us who were raised in the, educated about literacy tests in the South in the 60s during the age of Jim Crow, and all the various tricks that have been used over the years, not just in the 60s, but since, to prevent legal voters from casting their votes. We've all been very sensitive to the idea that, the shenanigans go on. And so this was in the back of our minds when we read news stories about contesting election results.
Well,
right?
Shenanigans around preventing voting. But
yes,
we weren't sensitized to the notion that there might be extra votes.
Right. No, that was not something that we were sensitized towards. So, in reality, now, in addition to a long list of other complaints, there are complaints about, there have been challenges to questions about the entire system of mail-in voting. There have been questions about ballot harvesting. There have been questions about whether or not states are doing enough to clean their rolls on time. There have been challenges in the other direction, basically saying that some states are overzealous in doing that. But what happened this week with the Supreme Court handed down a ruling, a 7-2 ruling, in favor of a lawsuit that was filed in Illinois, with the aid of kind of a well-known conservative action group, Judicial Watch. You've probably seen Tom Fitton. He's a pretty sort of major.
Tom's super fitting.
Yeah,
he's got guns. He's bursting out of every shirt they put on him.
Actually, we should do a separated at birth. Tom Fitton and Ed Hockley, the referee, right? Yes, so Tom's definitely got guns, and he filed a suit in Illinois where the one of the plaintiffs was a member of Congress, Mike Bost, who was challenging the notion that votes accepted after Election Day can be counted. Okay?
Not votes counted after Election days.
Not votes counted
votes
after
accepted after Election Day.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
In other words, the
possibly cast after Election Day. We're not sure.
Cast after Election Day, received after Election Day, so it's a very different thing than the way you'll see this reported. It's reported as GOP challenge to in-state voting or
voting
or to mail balloting. The headline with PBS over this was Supreme Court revives GOP congressman's challenge to late arriving mail ballot law. Now
that's only one subset of those possible late ballots.
Yes. Now there are two things about this case that are immediately very weird to me. There have been a lot of these suits. They've almost all been dismissed on the same grounds, that the plaintiffs do not have standing to sue. I talked to Fitton this morning, and we were going back and forth over the whole standing issue. And he said, okay, there are lots of arguments about this, but how can a candidate not have standing to sue in a race? And in fact, there originally was a ruling that he didn't have standing. So he
Who
went
did?
up.
Anybody? Can there be suits over these things or not?
Well, no, not now there can.
Right.
That's the whole
what
point.
yeah, now there can, but I mean, until then, who had standing? I guess they narrowed it down to the candidate.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually not sure what the full ruling says about that, but it does say it does open the door to further suits along this line.
The funny thing I always thought when they ruled that these were being thrown out for lack of standing was, this is a case in which almost everybody has standing.
Right.
Like, I mean, anyone who lives in the state, anyone who's affected by the results of the election, anyone who votes, but apparently not until now.
Right. So in the ruling here, and I believe the opinion was written by Roberts in this case. He writes, candidates, in short, are not, quote, mere bystanders in their own elections. It's weird that you need the Supreme Court to rule on that, but apparently you do. And then he added this strange line. The same is true of competitors in other contests. Each runner in a 100-meter dash, for example, would suffer if the race were unexpectedly extended to 105 meters, right? So that is quite a line, and really, this story is not about challenging the concept of mail-in voting. It's about the same topic that we've been discussing for weeks now, which is these wide areas where there is open disagreement between state and federal law and/or practice, right? So federal law says you have to vote on election day. And if your vote isn't in by election day, then it's not counted. But a lot of other states have new rules, right? Mississippi, which has a case that is going to be so what happened this week is half of a bomb going off. The other half would go off if there's a similar ruling in a coming case involving Mississippi. And so, in other words, the first half of this suit was about, can people sue over the question of people voting after election day? That's been settled. You can. There is standing. The next lawsuit, which is by way of a case that's coming up, not from Illinois, but Mississippi, is going to rule on the merits of voting after election day. That's what it is. A Libertarian Party of Mississippi v. Justin Wetzel, I think, is the case. It was originally, again, it was originally put down, but the Supreme Court has decided to take it, and if they rule a certain way on that case, we're going to see dramatic changes in voting, because the practice of not knowing, when voting ends, will come to a close, essentially, right? So here you can see the second page of the Wetzel ruling, the complaint, outlines how it says, under federal law, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of every even-numbered year is election day for federal elections. Congress recently reaffirmed a single election day when it enacted the Electoral Count Reform Act. Under the recent congressional amendments, no extension of election day is allowed unless there are, quote, force majeure events that are extraordinary and catastrophic. So 2020 might get a pass because that's COVID, but anything that happened after that, including some elections that were highly contested in 2024 and involved votes that came in after election day, that unless it's an actual emergency, they're not going to allow it anymore. So, but here
come more emergencies.
Well, right, yeah, either that, or states and the federal government are simply going to be in open disagreement about this,
right?
And we're going to have elections that may or may not be recognized, right. Depending on what happens with this ruling, right? So, I think this is crazy. This is one of those things where when I first read about this, when I first started looking at these cases, I was sure that this was about something else, that this was fundamentally the same dispute that Republicans and Democrats always have about voting, which is that there's always an attempt to try to force states to clean the rolls by Republicans, and there's always an attempt by Democrats to suggest that voters are being stricken unfairly, right? But in this case, we're talking about something that's really fundamental to voting, which is you got to vote on time, Right. And why in the world? Why would it ever be okay to vote like 5 days after Election Day, which Mississippi allows, or 7, which California allows?
Because you have a doctor's note, Matt. This is a doctor's note society now, or the equivalent of a doctor's note. I mean, in the large sense, what are the excuses that they've come up for it? I mean, have they? What have they argued is the necessity? Have there been arguments?
I haven't seen good ones. There have been complaints about the mail system, but most of these cases have phrases in them like postmarked by Election Day, right?
But in the 2020 election, we had this phenomena in which drop boxes aren't part of the U.S. mail network. They're just barrels with lids on them, put out in convenient places where votes pile up without postmarks.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's the California code, for instance. California Code Election 3020, subsection B. Notwithstanding subdivision A, any vote by mail ballot cast under this division shall be timely cast if it is received by the voter's elections official via the United States Postal Service or a bona fide private mail delivery company no later than 7 days after Election Day.
Oh.
And either of the following is satisfied. 1, the ballot is postmarked on or before Election Day or is time-stamped or date-stamped by a bona fide private mail delivery company on or before Election Day. Or if the ballot has no postmark, a postmark with no date, or an illegible postmark and no other information is available.
So it either needs a postmark or not.
Right.
What?
Yeah. And look, this all gets very like topsy-turvy, and essentially what it comes down to is there are exceptions. Voting is hard. People have a hard time getting to the polls.
Have you ever heard of someone FedExing their vote?
I have not.
Who are these bona fide private mail delivery companies that they're talking about?
I'm assuming they mean something like that. Okay. I'll have to learn more about it, but either way, this is an example of a significant news story that nobody knows anything about because it's been reported in a completely different fashion. In the legacy news media, right? If you see this reported at all, it's always a challenge to mail-in voting, which it's not really. It is a little bit a challenge to ballot harvesting, but mostly this is about you got to vote by election day, right? And what is the rationale for allowing votes 7 days afterwards? Like, we don't do that, do we?
But Matt, how do you know who needs your vote until you're waiting after election day and you've already seen the early returns? I mean, it's really hard not to know who needs your vote most, urgently if you haven't seen most of the returns before then. Right. I mean, is that piece of common sense even considered, that the reason you might wait is to figure out how to tilt the election?
Right. Yeah. I don't know, Walter. I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
Because that's the danger, people. Somehow going unstated, the elephant in the living room is if you vote after election day, you do so with knowledge of how the election is going.
Right. Yes. You're going to. We're going to allow this because now we know exactly how many votes we need. I don't know. It's something like that.
Well,
right?
I mean, that is the danger. That's the obvious reason for an election day and for it being limited to election day, especially in an age when we have information almost, from the moment the polls close about how it's going. I mean, in the old days, maybe they didn't get polls, exit polls 10 minutes later after the polls close. But who wants to vote before the polls close if it's possible to vote after them? I mean, if you want to make a difference.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So here's CNN's story about this. Supreme Court revives GOP congressman's absentee ballot suit that could spur more election litigation. The lead. The Supreme Court on Wednesday backed a Republican congressman from Illinois who is challenging a state law that allows mail ballots to be received after Election Day, a decision that may make it easier for other candidates to challenge voting laws, even if they ultimately win their election. The decision, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, was 7-2, with two of the court's liberals dissenting. Quote, candidates have a concrete and particularized interest in the rules that govern the counting of votes in their elections, regardless whether those rules harm their electoral prospects or increase the cost of their campaigns. Their interest extends to the integrity of the election and the democratic process by which they earn or lose the support of the people they seek to represent. And then it goes on it doesn't mention the timing issue at all, really. It says Boss did not raise claims of fraud at the Supreme Court, but President Donald Trump has repeatedly railed against the expansion of mail-in ballots during the COVID-19 pandemic, falsely blaming his 2020 election loss on those policies. Illinois changed its law long before the pandemic in 2005. And then there's a quote from an expert. Today's ruling could open the door to a lot of litigation and potential chaos on the far side of the next contested election, said Steve Vladek, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at the Georgetown University Law Center. So, you just heard how they're going to look at this.
Well, did you also see, I think it was Ketanji who argued the guy hadn't suffered any sort of loss from this current status quo.
Right, he won anyway.
Right.
So what? So why are we looking at this? Because there's a lot of reasons, right? Like if you now have to worry, if you have to deploy extra personnel to worry about votes that are coming in after Election Day, that's a cost. I mean, there's lots of different things, but the main thing that bothers me is that the core substance of this dispute is it's just not part of the public dialogue about this. How how do I feel about this? I mean, I'm kind of old school about voting. I think you should mostly just go. I don't think having an ID is a huge ask. And I like the idea of going in person. I don't like all these innovations that have allowed people to vote in lots of other ways.
They're not popular around the world, I can tell you that. This kind of voting, this mail-in voting, this expanded voting. I'm not only kind of a traditionalist about elections, I'm a traditionalist about time, about the clock. I like to think that a day means a day, and, you know, the days end at midnight and new ones start 1 minute after. I like to think that time doesn't expand it according to your need for something to happen during it, you know, and then contract again.
Right.
And so, and I'm sort of big on rules that people can understand, you know, the legibility and of rules. And I can't quite understand what we just read earlier about you either need a postmark, or if you don't have a postmark, that's okay too.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, right? So here's a section in the Mississippi complaint. The Mississippi legislature amended the state's absentee ballot receipt deadline in 2020. As amended, the law provides that, quote, absentee ballots and applications received by mail, except for fax or electronically transmitted ballots, as otherwise provided, must be postmarked on or before the date of the election and received by the registrar no more than 5 business days after the election. But under Mississippi's new ballot receipt deadline, absentee ballots shall be counted if received on or before November 12th, 2024. This was a couple of years ago, 5 days after the federally proscribed general election deadline of Tuesday, November 5th, in violation of Election Day mandate. So in other words, Mississippi, like I think it's 19 other states, has a different set of rules about how votes are counted and what votes are legal, right? And this is another situation where if they want to do that with state races, that's one thing. But you can't have 50 different sets of rules for federal voting. I don't think. Can you?
Matt, I don't think so either, but I hear over and over, the states have every prerogative in election law. And I would think that the federal law would supersede in the case of presidential and, federal elections. But my common sense about American law has been, frustrated before.
And there's no honest discussion about this. It's just, they're opening the door for these new lawsuits, and now it's going to be more complicated. Now there's going to be more questioning of results, and really, that's what we're worried about.
Remember how hard it was to count primary votes in places like Iowa just recently? I mean, we seem to have taken a rather straightforward human activity, counting one, counting in the regular base 10, fashion, and turned it in and then time. And we've taken each of those and made them so endlessly complex. And then we politicized the complexity. And then we've also said any further dispute about the complexity is a bridge too far. This is complicated and confusing, but what will really make it complicated and confusing is to question it.
Or try to simplify it.
Or simplify it.
Right. Yeah, Walter, my first come to Jesus moment about this was exactly at the moment you discussed, had nothing to do with Republicans at all. It was at the Iowa caucus, the highly disputed one where we I still don't know who won that
What they
caucus
did.
between Bernie and Pete Buttigieg. But
who did win that finally?
I don't even know. I think. I don't know. We'll have to get our mystery producer to check, because we obviously hung around for a long time, never got an answer.
Yeah.
We're both old enough. I don't know if you've ever covered the caucus in person, but the Iowa caucus is one of the easiest things to count in the entire world.